Hi, this is Gary with MACMOST.com. Let's look at why closing Windows on a Mac doesn't quit the application. MACMOST is brought to you thanks to a great group of more than 1,000 supporters. Go to MACMOST.com/Patreon. There you could read more about the Patreon campaign, join us, and get exclusive content and course discounts. So a common question of new Mac users is why when you close a window does the application not quit? The application's still running. Certainly in Microsoft Windows this works differently. If you close the last window of a running application, the application quits. Now Mac OS and this behavior actually predates Windows. So it's Windows that's actually doing the alternative, not the Mac. But regardless of that, if you're used to closing a window on Windows to quit an app and then that's not happening on the Mac, it can be a little confusing. Now as an example here, let's look at using Pages. So I've got the word processor Pages open with two different documents in two windows. So this is a typical application where a window contains a document. This is true for Pages, Numbers, Keynote, and other apps as well. And it's also true, say, in browsers where a browser window or tab contains a location, or in an app like Terminal where it contains an instance of using the terminal. Now you certainly wouldn't expect Pages to quit if I were to close one of these two windows. The other window is still there, so using the red X button at the top left or File Close or the keyboard shortcut Command W, all of those would simply close that window containing that one document and you would be left with Pages still running with the other window with the other document still there. So there's a consistency to having this red button do the same thing. It closes this window with this document but doesn't quit the app. You can see Pages is still running there. And you can see it also here in the dock with a dot under it. And if I were to use the App Switcher Command Tab, you could see Pages is one of the apps that's still running. So this works in other apps as well. For instance, here I am in Safari and if I close this window here, there's another one open, so you wouldn't expect Safari to quit. And if I close this window, Safari doesn't quit either. It's ready for me to open a new window, new private window, or go to a bookmark location. It even works that way in Microsoft apps. If I have two Word documents open here, I can close one, and then if I close the other you could see that it doesn't quit Microsoft Word. So even Microsoft Word, which doesn't always behave like a typical Mac app, will follow this basic rule. Now here's the classic example of why this is useful. Let's say you're working on this document here and you want to start a new one. What you may want to do then is close this document and now start a new one. But if Pages quits, now you've got a few steps. You actually have to launch Pages again before you start a new document. However, since Pages stays running because all you've done is close a document, not indicate that you want to quit Pages, you can now go and open a new document without having to relaunch Pages. So do you need two steps to quit an app? Do you need to close the document and then go to Pages, quit Pages, or Command Q? Well, if you just want to quit the app, you can just quit it. You can use Command Q or quit Pages and quit the app. Now an interesting thing happens when you do that. If you relaunch Pages, notice that the document that you had open before in a window, that reopens automatically. Matter of fact, if you had several documents open in several windows, they would all reopen automatically. So you can actually be working on something, use Command Q to quit, to get it out of the way, maybe switch to another task for a while. And then when you go back to that application, it resumes where you left off. Now whether it does this or not depends on your settings. If you go to System Settings and then to Desktop and Dock, there's a section here for Windows and Apps. And the setting, Close Windows when quitting an application, is the one you want to look for. If that's off, then quitting an app and then restarting it will bring all of the document windows back. However, if you turn it on, then quitting an app will actually do two things. Close all the current document windows and quit the app. But what happens if I'm in the middle of working on a document and I haven't saved? Well, just about all Mac apps will autosave, and if they don't, they'll prompt you to save before you quit the app. But you can see here in Pages, if I were to make a change like this and without saving, quit Pages, it autosaves. I launch Pages again and you can see my changes are there. There is a setting for this as well. It was right in the same place. If you look right above that first setting, you have Ask to keep changes when closing documents. If you were to turn that on and then go to close, you could see how it's going to prompt you. However, if you were to simply quit the app, it does it without complaining. It will save in that case regardless. And whichever way you have things set up to close documents when you quit an app or not, you can do the reverse. If you go to the app menu here and where it says quit, if you hold the option key down, it'll change to quit and close all windows. Or if you have that set as the default in system settings, then this would change to quit and keep all windows. And notice the keyboard shortcut is then simply Option Command Q. Now not all apps behave like this. Some apps have a single window, and when you close that single window it quits the app. So a great example is the Reminders app. The Reminders app more or less is just one window, and you look at different lists in this one window. So when you close this window, notice Reminders will quit. However, there is some inconsistency. For instance, Notes works in a very similar way to Reminders. Yet if you close the Notes window, Notes doesn't quit. Furthermore, Reminders isn't always just a single window app. If I bring up the context menu on a list here, I can choose Open List in New Window and have another window open. I can go over here to the main window and close that and Reminders doesn't quit. But if I close the last window for Reminders, it quits just like a Windows app. So in general, when you're dealing with apps that deal with documents or web pages, they all work with being able to close the window without quitting the app. Sometimes even Apple doesn't follow its own rule, like with the Reminders app. Now while this is all very interesting, it really doesn't matter. If you close the last Pages window like that and Pages is still running, it's not a big deal. An app like Pages that has no windows and no documents open really isn't using any resources. Keeping it running doesn't really harm anything. And in fact, there are advantages to keeping it running. For instance, you have more options when you control click on the dock item. Most apps, for instance, have a new document menu item that's only there if the app is still running. If I were to quit Pages, then I don't get that new document button. Other apps like Safari, you could see here, don't have much going on if they're not running. But if I launch Safari and close this window, now I could see Safari has new window and new private window as dock items. Another advantage is if the app is not normally in your dock but you want to keep it there. If you close a window, I'm using Pixelmator Pro here, I'll close this document window. Pixelmator Pro is still running but with no open windows. I can find it here on the right side of the dock because it's still running. However, if I were to quit Pixelmator Pro, now it's no longer in the dock. So it's a good way to temporarily get some items into the dock just by leaving them running with no documents open. Another advantage is using the app switcher. If I use Command Tab, I could see apps like, for instance, there's Pages and I have no documents open in Pages, but I can easily app switch to it and then maybe Command N for a new document without having to launch the app again. And of course there's the matter of some apps actually take a decent amount of time to launch. Not typically apps like Pages or Safari, but an app say like Xcode actually takes a bit of time to get going. So if you're a developer and you close a project you're working on, you may not actually want to quit Xcode if you know that after doing a few other tasks you're going to simply open up another Xcode project. So really what this comes down to is basically two different ways of doing things. Both have their advantages and disadvantages. On Windows it's sometimes nice to be able to click one button and the app is gone. And on Mac it's nice to be able to close a window and still have the app open ready for you to open up another document with that app. Longtime Mac users will scratch their heads over why Windows users even complain about this. And Windows users switching to Mac will wonder why Macs work this way. But it's really just a matter of getting used to closing the document or quitting the app depending upon which one you really want to do. Hope you found this useful. Thanks for watching. If you liked this video, click the thumbs up button below to let me know. I publish new tutorials each weekday. Hit the subscribe button so you don't miss out.